The wind howled across the frozen landscape of northern Greenland as Dr. Nathan Cole stared at his equipment screen. He had been studying Arctic ice for 15 years, mapping what lay beneath the ancient glaciers. He had found old riverbeds, frozen forests, and the bones of creatures that died millions of years ago. But he had never seen anything like this. The ground-penetrating radar showed a shape buried deep beneath the ice. It was over 300 meters long and perfectly symmetrical. Nature did not make shapes like this. Nathan checked his readings 3 times before he believed what he was seeing. Something was down there. And it was not natural. He called his colleague Dr. Linda Warren immediately. She arrived at the research station 2 days later, her face red from the cold wind. When Nathan showed her the data, she sat in silence for a long time. Then she said the words that would change human history forever. She said they needed to dig. The United States government responded faster than Nathan expected. Within 3 weeks, military transport planes landed on the ice. Soldiers set up a perimeter around the dig site. A man named Captain Marcus Hall introduced himself as their security liaison. He was tall, with gray eyes that seemed to notice everything. He told Nathan and Linda that their discovery was now classified at the highest level. No one outside this camp would know what they found until the government decided otherwise. Nathan did not like the secrecy, but he understood it. If there really was something artificial buried under ice that was 65 million years old, the world was not ready to hear about it. Not yet. The excavation took 2 months. Workers used heated drills and careful explosives to cut through ice that had not seen sunlight since before the dinosaurs went extinct. Nathan watched the progress every day, unable to sleep, unable to think about anything else. Linda was the same. They both knew they were about to uncover something that would rewrite every history book ever written. On a Tuesday morning in March, the drill team broke through into a vast underground cavern. Nathan was the first scientist to descend into the darkness. His flashlight beam cut through air that had been sealed away for millions of years. The cold down here was different. Older somehow. As if the chill itself remembered a time before humans existed. Then his light found the hull. It stretched before him like a sleeping giant, a spacecraft of impossible size and impossible age. The metal gleamed despite the eons it had spent in darkness. Nathan walked toward it slowly, his breath forming clouds in front of his face. He reached out and touched the surface. It was smooth and cold, and it felt real in a way that made his heart pound. Linda joined him minutes later. She walked around the ship without speaking, her scientific mind trying to process what her eyes were showing her. The design was unlike anything on Earth. Sweeping curves met sharp angles in ways that seemed both beautiful and functional. There were markings on the hull, symbols in a language neither of them had ever seen. Captain Hall arrived with a team of soldiers. He ordered them to secure the cavern, while the scientists continued their examination. His face showed no emotion, but Nathan noticed that his hands were shaking slightly. Even a military man could not stay calm in the presence of something like this. Linda found an opening in the hull on the second day. It was a door of some kind, sealed but not locked. When she touched a panel beside it, lights flickered inside the ship. Power still flowed through systems that should have died millions of years ago. The door slid open silently, revealing a corridor that led into darkness. Nathan knew they should wait. They should bring in more experts, more equipment, more time to prepare. But he also knew that he could not walk away from this moment. He stepped through the door, and Linda followed him. The interior of the ship was perfectly preserved. Control panels lined the walls, their screens dark but undamaged. The corridors were sized for beings roughly as tall as humans, which struck Nathan as strange. Everything about this ship felt almost familiar, as if it had been built by someone who thought the way humans thought. They found the command center at the heart of the vessel. It was a circular room, with a large chair in the center facing a wall of screens. And in that chair, they found the first body. It was not human, but it was not entirely alien either. The skeleton had 2 arms, 2 legs, a head with eye sockets, and a jaw. The proportions were different, the bones longer and thinner, but the basic shape was unmistakably humanoid. Nathan stared at the remains of a being that had died before his species even existed, and he felt something he could not explain. It felt like recognition. Linda found more bodies in other parts of the ship. Some were in what looked like sleeping quarters. Others were in a room filled with strange equipment that might have been medical. All of them had died in the same position, curled up as if they had gone to sleep and never woken up. Captain Hall sealed the ship immediately. He called his superiors and spoke in low tones that Nathan could not hear. When he finished, his face was grim. He told Nathan and Linda that a larger team would arrive within the week. He told them that what they had found would never be made public, not until the government understood what it meant. Nathan wanted to argue, but he knew it would be pointless. The military would control this discovery now. All he could do was continue his work and hope that the truth would eventually come out. That night, Nathan stood alone in the cavern, looking at the ancient ship. He thought about the beings who had built it, who had flown it across the stars, who had died here in the ice of a young Earth. He wondered where they had come from and why they had come here. He wondered if humanity was alone in the universe, or if there were others out there, watching, waiting. He did not know it then, but the answer to that question would come sooner than anyone expected. And when it did, it would terrify not just humanity, but every living species in the galaxy. 6 months passed since the discovery of the ancient ship. A massive research facility now surrounded the vessel, built in secret beneath the Greenland ice. Hundreds of scientists worked in shifts, studying every part of the spacecraft. The world above knew nothing of what lay hidden below. Dr. Samuel Pierce arrived on a cold morning in September. He was a language expert from a famous university, brought in to study the strange symbols found throughout the ship. He was a quiet man with thick glasses and a habit of talking to himself when he worked. Nathan did not know if Samuel could decode an alien language, but he hoped the man would try. Samuel spent 3 weeks examining the symbols before he had his breakthrough. He discovered that the ship's computer systems were still functional, waiting for someone to access them. The language was complex, but it followed patterns that Samuel could recognize. It was almost as if the beings who built this ship thought in ways similar to humans. When Samuel finally unlocked the data storage, the information that poured out changed everything. The ship's logs told a story that no one was prepared to hear. The vessel belonged to an ancient civilization. But that civilization was not alien. It was human. Or rather, it was something that came before humans, something that had given rise to humanity itself. They called themselves the ancestors in the translated records. 65 million years ago, they had ruled a vast empire that stretched across hundreds of star systems. They had built cities on worlds that modern humans had not yet discovered. They had technology that made Earth's greatest achievements look like children's toys, and they had been almost completely destroyed. Dr. Lisa Monroe was the geneticist assigned to study the remains found on the ship. She was young and brilliant, with short dark hair and eyes that never seemed to rest. When Samuel shared his translations with her, she immediately began new tests on the ancient bones. Her results confirmed the impossible. The DNA of the ancestors was human DNA. Not similar to human DNA, not related to human DNA, but actually human, with only minor variations. The beings who had built this ship were the same species as the scientists now studying it. Lisa presented her findings to the entire research team. The room was silent as she explained what this meant. Humanity had not evolved on Earth. Earth was never the birthplace of the human race. It was a hiding place, a refuge where survivors had fled after their civilization fell. Modern humans were the descendants of those survivors, changed by millions of years of evolution but still carrying the genetic legacy of their ancestors. The ship's logs explained what had happened. The ancestors had been too successful. They had spread across the galaxy faster than any other species. They had adapted to every environment, solved every problem, overcome every obstacle, and the other species of the galaxy had grown afraid. A great alliance called the Dominion had formed to stop humanity's expansion. Dozens of alien races had united under a single purpose: the destruction of the ancestors. The war that followed had lasted for centuries. The ancestors fought with everything they had, but they were outnumbered by enemies who feared them more than they feared death. Nathan listened to Samuel read the final entries in the ship's log. The captain of this vessel had written about the end of everything. The Dominion had released a weapon. A disease designed to kill only humans. It had spread through the Empire like fire through dry grass. Billions died in weeks. The great cities fell silent. The mighty fleet became a graveyard of drifting ships. The survivors scattered to the far corners of the galaxy, hoping to find places where the Dominion would not follow. This ship had come to Earth, a young planet in an unimportant solar system. The crew had hoped to start again, to rebuild their civilization in secret. But the disease had followed them. They had died here, one by one, until none remained. Their descendants had survived, though. Primitive humans had emerged from the genetic legacy left behind, slowly evolving on this hidden world, while the galaxy forgot they existed. Captain Marcus Hall, now wearing the stars of a general after 6 months of managing the most important secret in human history, asked the question everyone was thinking. He asked if the Dominion still existed. Samuel did not know. The logs were 65 million years old. Civilizations rose and fell in that time. The Dominion might have collapsed long ago, or it might still be out there, watching for any sign of human survival. The answer came when Samuel tried to access the deepest archives in the ship's computer. The system required verification, and the only way to provide it was to activate an emergency beacon. Samuel did so without thinking, eager to unlock more knowledge about humanity's past. The beacon was designed to reach across the stars, to contact any surviving ancestor ships or colonies. It had been waiting 65 million years for someone to activate it. When Samuel pressed the button, it sent a signal into the darkness of space, a signal that announced to the entire galaxy that humanity still existed. Nathan watched the data stream flow from the ship's antenna, broadcasting into the void. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Arctic cold. They had just told the universe where to find them. If the Dominion was still out there, if they were still watching for signs of human survival, they now knew exactly where to look. Lisa stood beside him, her face pale. She said what they were all thinking. She said they might have just invited extinction. General Hall immediately contacted his superiors. Emergency meetings were held at the highest levels of government. The beacon could not be stopped, its signal already racing toward distant stars at the speed of light. All they could do now was wait and prepare for whatever response might come. Nathan spent that night reading the translations of the ancestor logs, learning about the civilization that had given birth to humanity. They had been explorers and builders, scientists and artists. They had dreamed of spreading life across the cosmos. And they had been murdered for it, betrayed by species who could not accept that humans were different, were faster, were more adaptable than anyone else. He made a promise to himself as he read. If the Dominion came, humanity would not go quietly this time. They would fight with everything they had, and they would win. The ships appeared 18 months after the beacon was activated. Telescopes detected them first. Strange objects moving through the outer solar system at speeds no human vessel could match. The world's governments had spent those 18 months preparing for this moment, building defenses, training soldiers, hoping that the response would be peaceful, while fearing it would not be. Kevin Shaw was chosen to lead humanity's diplomatic response. He was a former ambassador, with gray hair and a calm voice that never seemed to waver. The government gave him a title and a mission. He was to make contact with whoever had come and determine their intentions. He was to represent all of humanity in the most important conversation in history. The alien ships stopped at the edge of the solar system and waited. They made no hostile moves, sent no threatening messages. They simply sat there, as if they were uncertain what to do next. Kevin worked with Samuel Pierce to send a message using the communication systems from the ancestor ship. They told the visitors that humanity was aware of their presence. They invited them to talk. The response came within hours. A single small vessel broke away from the alien fleet and traveled toward Earth. It requested permission to land and speak with human representatives. The request was polite, almost nervous in its tone. Kevin granted permission, and prepared to meet the first aliens humanity had ever encountered. The alien craft landed at a military base in the Nevada desert. Kevin stood with General Hall and a team of scientists as the door opened and something walked out into the Earth's sun for the first time. The being was tall and thin, with blue-gray skin and large dark eyes. It had 4 arms and moved with a grace that seemed almost liquid. It wore robes that shimmered with colors Kevin could not name. When it spoke, the translation device they had built from ancestor technology converted its words into English. The alien introduced itself as HFY, an envoy from a species called the Valorians. It said it had come with a warning and a confession. Kevin invited HFY into the base, where they sat across from each other at a simple table. The alien seemed uncomfortable, its large eyes constantly moving as if searching for threats. When it finally began to speak, its words carried the weight of millions of years. HFY explained that the Dominion still existed. The alliance that had destroyed the ancestors had endured across the ages, held together by a shared fear of human return. When the beacon activated, that fear had exploded into panic. The Dominion was mobilizing its fleets, gathering its forces for what they believed would be the final battle against humanity. Kevin asked how long they had before the attack came. HFY said perhaps 10 years. Perhaps less. The Dominion was vast, and coordinating such a large force took time, but they would come, and they would bring enough ships to burn Earth to ash. General Hall asked why HFY had come to warn them. The alien could have stayed silent, could have let humanity be destroyed without ever knowing what was coming. HFY's answer shocked everyone in the room. The Valorians had been part of the Dominion during the ancient war. They had helped destroy the ancestors, but they had done so through treachery, not strength. The Dominion had not won through superior weapons or greater numbers. They had won through betrayal. The alien explained what happened 65 million years ago. The ancestors had agreed to peace talks, hoping to end the war through negotiation. The Dominion had accepted, but it was a trap. During the negotiations, they released a bioweapon designed to target human DNA. The disease spread through the ancestor fleet before anyone knew what was happening. Billions died before they could fight back. HFY said the Valorians had helped create that weapon. They had provided the genetic research that made it possible. For 65 million years, they had lived with that guilt. Now, some among them believed it was time to make amends. The Valorians were not offering to fight beside humanity. They were too afraid of the Dominion for that. But they were offering intelligence, information about Dominion forces and tactics. They were offering a chance. Kevin asked what the Dominion feared so much about humans. The ancestors had been powerful, yes. But so were many species. Why had the entire galaxy united to destroy them? HFY's answer was simple. Humans adapt. Other species found worlds that suited them and stayed there. Humans found worlds that did not suit them and changed themselves to survive. Other species developed technology slowly, over millions of years. Humans developed technology in generations. Other species accepted limits. Humans refused to accept that limits existed. The Dominion had watched humanity spread across the stars like a force of nature. They had watched humans solve problems that other species had struggled with for ages. They had watched, and they had become afraid. Not afraid of what humans had done, but afraid of what humans would become if they were not stopped. Kevin understood then what humanity was facing. This was not a war over territory or resources. This was a war of fear, a war fought because the galaxy could not accept that humans were different. The ancestors had died because they were too good at surviving. He thanked HFY for the warning and the information. Then he asked if the Valorians would help humanity find allies. Other species who might be willing to stand against the Dominion. HFY hesitated before answering. There were some, it said, who had grown tired of Dominion rule. There were some who remembered the ancestors not as monsters but as liberators who had freed them from oppression. They were few and they were afraid, but they existed. Kevin smiled for the first time since the meeting began. Few and afraid was a starting point. Humanity had started with less before. General Hall spoke up then. his voice hard as iron. He said that humanity would not hide. They would not run to the edges of the galaxy and hope to be forgotten. The ancestors had tried that, and they had died anyway. This time, humans would stand and fight. Kethvar looked at the general with something that might have been respect or might have been pity. It said the Dominion had destroyed civilizations that were older and more powerful than humanity. It said the odds were impossible. General Hall's response became famous in the years that followed. He said humans had never cared much about odds. The frozen ship held more secrets than anyone had imagined. Dr. Linda Warren discovered them 3 years after first contact. Hidden in a sealed chamber, deep within the engineering section, the ancestors had left behind more than a graveyard. They had left behind a gift. The chamber contained what Linda called a seed vault. Rows of containers held genetic samples, technological blueprints, and detailed instructions written in the ancestor language. Samuel Pierce spent months translating the files, and what he found made him weep with joy. The ancestors had known they might not survive. They had prepared for the possibility that their civilization would fall and only scattered survivors would remain. The seed vault was their legacy, a complete guide to rebuilding everything they had lost. It contained the knowledge of a species that had mastered the stars, preserved for whoever might come after. Dr. Nathan Cole led the team that began implementing the ancestor knowledge. He was no longer the young scientist who had discovered the ship. Years of work and stress had turned his hair gray and lined his face, but his eyes still held the same fire they had when he first touched that ancient hull. The technology in the vault was beyond anything humanity had developed. Propulsion systems that could cross between stars in weeks instead of years, weapons that could crack planets, medical advances that could cure diseases and extend life by centuries. It was overwhelming. Too much to absorb in the time they had before the Dominion arrived. But the vault contained something more important than technology. It contained the truth about human DNA. Lisa Monroe had spent years studying the genetic records in the ship. Now, with access to the full ancestor archives, she finally understood what made humans unique. Human DNA was not natural. It was engineered, refined over millions of years to be the ultimate survival mechanism. The ancestors had modified themselves continuously, adding new abilities with each generation. They could adapt to any environment, from frozen wastelands to burning deserts to the vacuum of space itself. They could resist diseases that killed other species in days, and most importantly, they could integrate technology with their own biology in ways no other species could match. This was why the Dominion feared humans. This was why they had resorted to genocide. Humans were not just another species competing for resources. Humans were something new in the galaxy, something that grew stronger with every challenge they faced. Given enough time, humans would become unstoppable. Lisa presented her findings to the world's leaders. The ancestor knowledge could be used to enhance living humans, to unlock abilities that had been dormant in their DNA for millions of years. Soldiers could become faster and stronger. Scientists could become smarter. Every human being could become more than they had ever been. The decision to proceed was not easy. Some argued that changing human DNA was too dangerous, too unpredictable. Others said it was playing God with forces they did not understand. But in the end, the reality of the coming invasion made the choice clear. Humanity needed every advantage it could get. The enhancement programs began in secret, starting with military volunteers. General Hall was among the first to receive the treatments. Within weeks, he could run faster than any normal human, think more clearly, recover from injuries that would have crippled him before. The enhancements worked, and they spread through the armed forces as quickly as they could be administered. Meanwhile, engineers worked day and night to build ships using ancestor designs. Factories that had made cars and planes now made weapons of war. The world's economies shifted to support a single purpose. Humanity was preparing for the fight of its existence. Linda Warren made the greatest discovery of all in the final months before the invasion. Hidden in the deepest files of the seed vault, she found plans for a weapon the ancestors had been developing when they fell. They called it the Silencer. The Dominion's greatest strength was coordination. Hundreds of species working together as one, sharing information instantly across vast distances. They achieved this through a vast communication network that connected every ship, every world, every soldier in their alliance. Without that network, the Dominion would become a collection of individual species, unable to coordinate, unable to trust each other. The silencer was designed to destroy that network. A single device that could broadcast a signal across the galaxy, disrupting the communication systems that held the Dominion together. The ancestors had never finished building it, but they had left complete plans for those who came after. Nathan Cole took personal charge of the silencer project. He worked without sleep, pushing his enhanced body to its limits. The device had to be ready before the Dominion fleet arrived. Everything depended on it. Ambassador Kevin Shaw had not been idle during these years. He had traveled to secret meetings with representatives of species who opposed the Dominion. The Valorians had provided introductions, and Kevin had done the rest. He was a diplomat, and convincing people to take his side was what he did best. By the time the Dominion fleet began its journey toward Earth, Kevin had assembled a coalition of 12 species willing to fight alongside humanity. They were not many compared to the Dominion's hundreds. But they were brave, and they were angry. Some had been oppressed by the Dominion for millions of years. Some remembered the ancestors as friends and liberators. All of them believed that this was the moment to finally break free. The Alliance gathered in secret, hiding their ships in the shadows of gas giants and the darkness between stars. They waited for humanity's signal, ready to fight for a future where fear did not rule the galaxy. Nathan finished the silencer on a quiet evening, 7 years after the beacon first announced humanity's survival. He held the device in his hands, a machine no larger than a briefcase that could change the fate of civilizations. He thought about the ancestors who had designed it, who had hoped it would save their people. They had run out of time. Nathan had not. The Dominion fleet would arrive in 3 years. Humanity would be ready. The Dominion fleet arrived on a cold December morning, 10 years after the beacon had first called out into the darkness. Over 10,000 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. They represented 60 different species, united by a fear that had burned for 65 million years. They had come to finish what their ancestors had started. General Marcus Hall stood on the bridge of his flagship, a vessel named Defiance. It was the largest ship humanity had ever built, a fusion of ancestor technology and human innovation. Through the windows, he could see the Earth hanging in space behind him, blue and green and fragile. 8 billion people lived on that world, and every single one of them was counting on him. The human fleet numbered 300 ships. They were outnumbered more than 30 to 1. But Hall had faced worse odds before, and he had never lost. He would not start losing today. Beside the human ships floated the vessels of their allies. 12 species had answered humanity's call, bringing another 200 ships to the battle line. The Valorians had come, finally choosing courage over fear. Others had come from the far reaches of the galaxy, species whose names humans could barely pronounce. United by hope, for the first time in millions of years, the Dominion fleet spread across space like a wall of death. Their commander broadcast a message to the human forces. He demanded immediate surrender. He promised that if humanity submitted, they would be allowed to live as servants of the Dominion. If they fought, they would be exterminated down to the last child. Hall's response was simple. He told the Dominion commander that humans did not kneel. The battle began with fire. Dominion weapons reached across the void. Beams of energy that could melt through steel like water through paper. Human ships scattered, using their superior maneuverability to avoid the worst of the assault. The ancestor technology gave them speed that the Dominion had not expected. Ships that should have died in the first moments of combat instead danced through the destruction, firing back with weapons that tore through Dominion armor. The allied species fought beside humanity, their ships mixing with the human fleet. Some fell in the opening minutes, but others survived and pressed the attack. For the first time in memory, the Dominion faced an enemy that did not break at first contact. Nathan Cole was not on the front line. He had a different mission, one that would determine the outcome of the entire war. His ship was small and fast, designed for a single purpose. He carried the silencer, the weapon that could shatter the Dominion's unity. Linda Warren flew beside him, piloting their vessel through the chaos of battle. Samuel Pierce monitored their systems, calling out warnings as enemy fire came close. They were scientists, not soldiers. But this mission required knowledge that soldiers did not have. The Dominion communication hub was at the center of their fleet, a massive station that coordinated the movements of 10,000 ships. Nathan had to get close enough to activate the silencer, close enough that the signal would overwhelm the hub's defenses. It was a suicide mission in any normal sense. But Nathan had not come this far to fail. Human ships fell around them as they pushed deeper into enemy territory. Nathan watched friends die, watched vessels crewed by people he had worked with for years disappear in flashes of light. He did not look away. He owed them that much. The Dominion realized what was happening too late. Ships turned to intercept Nathan's vessel, but human fighters threw themselves into the path, buying precious seconds with their lives. General Hall himself led a charge that drew enemy attention away from the small craft carrying humanity's last hope. Nathan reached the communication hub just as his ship took a critical hit. Alarms screamed and smoke filled the air, but the silencer was intact. He activated the device and watched the display light up as the signal broadcast across the stars. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Dominion fleet had operated as one mind for millions of years. Every ship connected, every commander sharing information instantly. When that connection broke, chaos erupted. Species that had never trusted each other suddenly found themselves isolated, unable to coordinate, unable to know what their allies were doing. Ancient grudges resurfaced in moments. Ships that had fought side by side for millennia turned their weapons on each other as suspicion and fear took hold. The unified Dominion fleet became a fractured mob. General Hall saw the opportunity and seized it. He ordered every human and allied ship to attack, to press the advantage before the enemy could recover. The battle became a slaughter. Dominion vessels fled or surrendered or died, depending on the species and their captain. The great armada that had come to destroy humanity tore itself apart. By the time the sun set on the other side of Earth, the Dominion fleet was broken. Over 7,000 of their ships were destroyed or captured. The rest fled into the darkness, scattered and alone for the first time in their history. Nathan's ship drifted in the debris field, its engines dead. Linda held his hand as they waited for rescue, both of them too exhausted to speak. Samuel had taken a wound during the battle, but he was alive, breathing steadily in the seat behind them. They had done it. Against all odds, against all reason, they had won. The aftermath of the battle reshaped the galaxy. The Dominion did not collapse immediately, but the unity that had held it together was shattered beyond repair. Species that had been forced to cooperate began to go their own ways. Some sought peace with humanity, others retreated to their home systems and closed their borders. The great alliance that had terrorized the stars for 65 million years was finished. Ambassador Kevin Shaw led the negotiations that followed. Dominion commanders who had survived the battle were given a choice. They could face justice for the crimes of their ancestors, or they could help build a new order in the galaxy. Most chose to cooperate. Kevin spoke to representatives from across the stars, delivering the message that would define humanity's role in the cosmos. He said that Earth would not seek vengeance for the genocide of the ancestors. The beings who had committed those crimes were long dead, and punishing their descendants would solve nothing. Humanity had learned the cost of fear, and they would not repeat the mistake. But Kevin also made clear that humanity would never be hunted again. They would take their place among the stars as equals, not as victims or conquerors. Any species that threatened Earth would face the full strength of human resolve, and any species that sought friendship would find it. Nathan Cole attended the ceremony where humanity officially joined the galactic community. He stood with Linda and Samuel and General Hall, watching as Kevin signed the treaties that guaranteed humanity's future. He thought about everything they had sacrificed, everyone they had lost, and he hoped it was worth it. The galaxy had feared humanity for 65 million years. They had feared human strength and human adaptability and human refusal to accept defeat. They had feared what humans might become if they were allowed to grow. Now they understood that their fear had been justified, but not for the reasons they had believed. Humanity was not dangerous because of their power or their technology or their determination. Humanity was dangerous because, even after everything that had been done to them, they still chose mercy. That was the real reason the galaxy would never forget this day. Not because humanity had won, but because humanity had won and then offered their hand in friendship instead of raising it in vengeance. The stars belonged to everyone now, and for the first time in millions of years, the future was not something to fear.